The sun was sinking low behind the western ridge, painting the sky in long streaks of amber and rust. Jed Carson stood by the weathered fence, his hand resting on the rough wood, eyes fixed on the empty road that cut through the prairie like a scar. The land stretched wide and silent around him, golden grass swaying in the dying light, a place too big for one man's grief. 3 days had passed since he'd sold his horse, but the echo of hoofbeats still haunted the edge of his thoughts, as if the animal's spirit lingered somewhere beyond the horizon. Buck had been more than just a horse. He'd been a partner, a friend, the only living thing Jed had trusted since the world turned mean on him. They'd been through everything together, floods, storms, long nights of cattle drives, and longer winters when the snow buried the fences and hunger scraped at their bones. Jed could still remember the day his father brought Buck home, a wild bay colt with fire in his eyes and a kick that could take down a door. His father had said, "A man's horse tells the truth about him. Treat him wrong, he'll show the world who you are." Jed had lived by that. But the years had a way of taking things a man didn't want to give. The drought came first. Then the sickness that took his father. And finally the debts. Quiet, creeping things that stacked up like dry tinder. The bank man, Mr. Elridge, had come last week with his fine hat and polished words, reminding Jed that land didn't stay free forever. Jed had stood on that same porch, fists clenched at his sides, while the man tallied up the numbers that chained him. "You've got till Friday, Carson," Elridge had said. "After that, the land reverts to the bank." Jed hadn't slept that night. He'd sat by the fire, staring at the flames licking the wood down to ash. He had nothing left worth money, except Buck. The thought twisted in his gut like a knife. By dawn, he'd made the walk to town, each step heavier than the last. The man who bought Buck was a cattle baron named Riker, a brute with rings on his fingers and eyes that never smiled. Jed remembered the way Riker had appraised the horse, running a greedy hand down the animal's flank. Buck had shifted his weight, ears flicking back, not liking the man one bit. Jed had swallowed the lump in his throat. "Fine animal," Riker had said, tossing a small leather pouch onto the table. "You'll get fair coin." "That's all you'll get," Jed had nodded, though every muscle in his jaw ached from holding back what he wanted to say. When he handed over the reins, Buck had hesitated, looking back at him, dark eyes wide with confusion. Jed couldn't bear to meet them. He'd turned away as Riker mounted up and rode off toward the south trail, the sound of hooves fading into the dust. Now, standing there days later, Jed felt the weight of that silence settle on his chest again. The wind had died completely. The world seemed to be holding its breath. He turned toward the cabin, a small square of rough logs and tin-patched roof, smoke curling from the chimney. Inside, the fire burned low, throwing a faint glow across the wooden floor. Jed poured himself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and sat in the creaking chair by the window. The taste was wrong without the rhythm of Buck's breathing outside the door. He'd always been there, loyal, steady, like a heartbeat in the stillness. Jed sighed, setting the cup down, eyes wandering toward the window. The prairie outside was a darkening ocean, windless and endless. The moon hadn't yet risen, but he could see the faint shimmer of stars breaking through. It was then, faint at first, he heard it, a sound. Distant, rhythmic. Hooves. Jed straightened, pulse quickening. He told himself it couldn't be. There were plenty of horses that passed through the plains. But the sound grew clearer, closer, the familiar pattern of gait he knew better than his own heartbeat. That uneven rhythm, left hind striking just a half-beat late from an old injury in the canyon years ago, his heart jumped. He pushed away from the chair, nearly spilling the coffee, and went to the door. The night air was cold and sharp as he stepped outside. He scanned the road, eyes straining in the dim light. Then he saw it, a shape emerging from the shadows. A horse moving slow, its head hanging low, dust clinging to its coat. The moon broke through the clouds, silver light spilling over the plain, and Jed's breath caught. It was Buck. He'd know that silhouette anywhere. The broad chest, the scar along his flank, the proud arch of his neck. But something was wrong. The horse's sides heaved with exhaustion, his mane matted, reins dragging, and across his back, Jed blinked, not trusting what he saw, was a figure. Someone slumped over the saddle motionless. "Buck?" Jed whispered, voice cracking. The horse stopped at the gate, as if he'd come home after a long journey, and gave a low, broken whinny. Jed ran forward, boots pounding the dirt, heart hammering so hard it hurt. As he reached Buck, the smell of blood hit him, faint, metallic. The figure on the horse shifted, a limp arm sliding down. Jed caught it before it fell, and saw it belonged to a young woman. Her dress was torn, streaked with dirt and blood. Her head lolled to one side, dark hair tangled with dust, and her breathing was shallow, uneven. "Easy now," Jed murmured, voice trembling. "I've got you." He lifted her gently from the saddle, arms tightening as he felt how cold she was. Buck stood still, head bowed, sides quivering from the long ride. Jed laid the woman against his chest, glancing down at her face in the moonlight. She couldn't have been more than 20. A small silver locket hung from her neck, glinting faintly, marked with delicate initials. E.M. He didn't recognize them. "What happened to you?" he whispered. She didn't answer. Her lips were cracked, pale, her breathing ragged. Jed carried her inside, the firelight spilling over her as he laid her on the cot near the hearth. He threw a few logs onto the flames, the crackle of burning wood filling the silence. Buck lingered at the door, his shadow tall against the wall, watching. Jed grabbed a basin, filled it with water, and cleaned the blood from her forehead. The cut wasn't deep, but it looked like she'd been struck hard. He tore a strip of cloth from an old shirt and bound it carefully. Then he poured a little water into a tin cup and lifted it to her lips. She swallowed weakly, her throat working. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly. Her eyelids fluttered, but no words came. She drifted in and out, trembling. Jed sat beside her, rubbing warmth into her hands, his mind a storm of questions. How had Buck found her? Where had he come from? And how in God's name had the horse made it all the way back here with her on his back? Outside, the wind began to stir again, whispering through the grass. The sound should have comforted him, but it didn't. Buck shifted uneasily, ears twitching, and gave a soft snort. Jed looked up, following the horse's gaze toward the open prairie. The horizon was dark, but somewhere out there, faint and far, a light flickered. Then came another. Lanterns moving. Jed's jaw tightened. Someone was out there, and they were coming this way. He turned back to the woman. She stirred again, her eyes flicking open, gray and clouded with pain. She looked straight at him, fear lighting in her gaze. Her voice came out hoarse and broken. "They're coming," she whispered. "Don't let them find me." Jed froze before he could speak. A sharp crack split the night, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot rolling across the plains. Buck reared, neighing loud, hooves striking the earth. Jed leapt to his feet, grabbed the rifle from its place by the door, and peered out into the darkness. He could see shapes now, 3 riders, maybe 4, far off, but closing fast, their lanterns swaying. He turned back to the woman. Her breathing had quickened, panic in her eyes. "Who are they?" he asked. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. "Please," she whispered, "hide me." Jed's chest tightened. He didn't know what trouble she'd brought with her, but Buck hadn't come back for nothing. The horse stood in the doorway, sides heaving, eyes fixed on him, waiting. Jed had seen that look before, years ago, when Buck had dragged him out from under a fallen log after a flash flood. A look that said, "Trust me." Jed nodded once. He moved fast, lifting the woman again, carrying her behind the storage wall near the back of the cabin where the shadows pooled thick. He laid her down gently, covering her with a blanket. The hoofbeats outside grew louder. 4 riders now, close enough that he could hear the creak of saddles, the murmur of voices. Jed's grip on the rifle tightened. He stepped to the door, cracked it open, and saw them, men in dust coats, faces half hidden, rifles glinting in the lantern light. Buck snorted. Stepping forward, muscles tensing, Jed whispered low, almost to himself, "Easy, boy." "We'll see what this is," the lead rider called out, voice harsh and edged with impatience. "Evening, friend." "We're looking for a girl. Came this way on a stolen horse. You seen anyone pass through?" Jed's heart pounded. He looked at Buck, the stolen horse. then back at the men. "No," he said slowly. "Ain't seen no one all week." The man squinted, eyes flicking to the horse by the fence. "That yours?" Jed's jaw clenched. "He is now." The man's hand drifted toward his revolver. "That's so." Jed didn't flinch. The air between them hung heavy. Then somewhere behind him, the faintest sound, the creak of floorboards, betrayed him. The rider's head snapped up. "Inside!" one shouted. Jed raised the rifle. The night exploded, and in that instant, as fire sparked from the barrel and Buck lunged forward into the gunfire, Jed knew the horse had brought her back not just to be saved, but to save him too.